Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Explode Your Expert Business Show. And today I'm here with the one and only Zion Kim. How you doing, Zion?
Doing amazing, man.
Oh, fantastic. So we spent some incredible time in Croatia, in an island with a bunch of other entrepreneurs. We connected. I've been following you for a while as well on social media. And I said, yeah, perfect guest in particular about a service business. That's what you do day in and day
Sure.
out. So I love to pick your brain on that, and I'm sure that our audience will love to pick your brain as well. So let's start before we get into the conversation. Tell us a bit more about you and how did you get to this point?
So I've definitely learned everything through many failures, mistakes, and just kind of learning from where I messed up along the way. My first business was a custom clothing company for fraternities and sororities. And we had this one week where we literally had, thousands upon thousands of orders, which in the typical world would be a great thing. But that ended up, teaching me everything what operational scale was not, because we got the last order out probably 3 months, 3 months after the fact, when we were promising people it would happen the week after. And because it was just all completely custom, right? So it's, so there's a lot of very unfortunate things that came out of that, but a lot of really great learning lessons. And then
What products or service was that?
that was clothing.
Clothing. Yeah.
Yeah, that was custom clothing. So that was embroidery, that was applique. So there's a lot of really fun experiences there, because I got to learn about a whole new world. But it definitely got to a point where it was just really difficult, really challenging. I'm happy I moved past it. And then the business after that was, we opened one of the largest co-working spaces in New Jersey. And that's kind of where I start to really learn about operations, how to get myself out of it, how to, hire in the community managers, everything like that. And we got that whole space operationalized, and also ran one of New Jersey's largest tech and entrepreneurial meetup groups out of that space as well. And I know how much you love events, and I know you and I briefly chatted about that. But I host an event every month for about 2 years, and with about 150 people a month, sometimes more than an event a month, a couple conferences in there as well. And then fast forward. After that, I had a digital agency for a few years where, we had, quite a few like WordPress plugins. We had like a whole like dev component to it. So we've had probably like over 100,000 websites using our plugins, and then also had been running traffic for companies that are usually between, my smallest clients were like maybe like 2 to 3 million, and the next smallest one is like 20 million. So, but most of the companies were, 8 figures to even like a few $billion. So I just ran all their digital acquisition strategies. And that really led me to today, where, we're just helping scale, service-based businesses by helping people leverage better business models, better systems, ops, sales, marketing, all the above, right? So
when I can see that you got like literally an experience and expertise in a lot of different fields. There are industries that are completely different, from office spaces to clothing to events. When did you get your entrepreneurial itch? I think sometimes there's a point when you're like, okay, actually.
No, that's a great question. So when I was 15 or 16, I was a gamer at the time. I was, on my way to become a professional gamer, and that was my 100% aspiration. And, back then I kept being told, oh, you can't do stuff until you're 18, because that's like the legal age here. And, and I had quite a bit of a chip on my shoulder about that. And all of a sudden I start seeing like people doing business. So honestly, the reason why I got into business in the first place was just because it was something that I wasn't supposed to do. And it was something that was really interesting. So when we were 16, we started our first kind of, web development company. But, I also have the typical story of, when I was 10 or earlier than that, had the whole like lemonade stand stuff. going on. And even earlier than that, we used to trace like these drawings from like coloring, like from these like Pokemon coloring books. And then we'd have like these really awesome like drawings, and then we would sell them in our third grade class for like, 10, 20 cents or whatever that people want to give us for them. So that's really how it got started for me in terms of why I got interested in marketing, not marketing, just business in general. But that's also where I learned a lot about marketing as well, or I got my first taste of marketing, I should say. So I don't know if you've ever used like IRC or anything like that, but that's like way back when that was the primary way that all the gamers used.
No, I haven't used those. I literally started getting into business. Was that like 9 years ago? Yeah, 9 years ago. I was 22 at the time, so that wasn't something I wasn't using in there. But I have one more question before we go into the other.
Sure.
A bit more about you. Is there any business that you've been in that you're like, you couldn't wait to get out of it? Because you have started multiple businesses. And
oh yeah. That was my first one, my first business for sure. Because what's interesting about the path of business is, I always try to take it to the point where, we're hitting like a 6-figure run rate, and then that gives you a really good idea of what's next in the business to take it to the next level. And when I get to that point, I have a pretty good idea of the industry, I have a pretty good idea of what sales, marketing, ops look like for that business. And then I just ask myself the question of, okay, well, is this something I really see myself continuing with? Which is why I've gone into a bunch of things, gone out of a bunch of things, and vice versa. But I'd say that first business was probably the most challenging for me. Because I was 19 and had no idea what I was doing. So that was where I had to learn a ton, and I just made every single mistake that you could possibly imagine, and and it wasn't very fulfilling, right? Like I didn't really feel that I was like helping people. I definitely felt that I was fulfilling and serving a need, and taking and exploiting an opportunity in the marketplace. But the question that I asked myself then was, if I disappeared tomorrow, like if this business disappeared tomorrow, like would people actually notice? And what would the impact be on those individuals? And when I asked myself that question, I was like, this is not what I was put on this earth for. This is not something that I want to take to the next level. Because, I saw what it took to grow it and take, and to really, really blow it out as a business, make it sellable, whatever. But it was just a matter of, okay, well, I can put another year, 2 years, 3 years into this of my life, or I can go do something else.
Sure. And I think that, a lot of people that are listening right now, they may have this in a previous business, and that's why they started the current businesses they're in. Or they might have felt the same as employees in a job that they didn't like, and then decided, okay, now I want something which is not only fulfilling on a financial level, but also is fulfilling on an emotional level, on a spiritual level. And right, so let's go into we know each other a bit more. Let's get into scaling to a service-based business. So what I want to talk about is, as I said before in the chat, is like the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because I think I remember when we started our business, we said, okay, we want to have this huge company, we want to have a lot of people working for us, and that was a dream at the beginning, and then that dream became a reality. But it didn't look anything like it was in the initial dream. And there were plenty of times where I was like looking back with nostalgia at the time where it was just on my own, or just me and my business partner. And that's it. And we had way less moving pieces of the puzzle, and way less complications of the business. And so let's give a reality check on the reality of scaling a business. So first of all, let's start with some of the misconception or the myths that there are out there for someone that says, okay, I want to scale this business. I want to scale this. What are they really in for?
So I think the biggest misconception, so I would say there's two that come to the top of mind right away. The first one is when I solve my lead gen problem, business will get better and I will finally be taken care of and things will, be good because then the business will be growing, whatever. That's probably like myth number one, right? Is, and the reason is because most people think that's where it ends, and that's like the holy grail is predictable lead gen, predictable revenue, whatever it might be. But what people don't understand is that's where all the problems actually start, right? When you start to, because especially for those that are listening to this that don't have a high volume of sales calls right now or anything like that, once you solve your lead gen issue and you start hopping on 20, 30 sales calls a week, it starts to become quite exhausting, right? So when you're first getting started, every time you hop on a sales call, you're like, yes, an opportunity, this is great. And you really, kind of cherish, each and every call that you hop on, but eventually it gets to a point where it becomes quite mundane, right? And that might not be the easiest reality for people to grasp because it's just not, something that people ever get to. It's a problem that people never quite experience. But, I've had a lot of people where they're quite burnt out and quite bored, quite frankly, because the conversation is literally the same conversation over and over again, right? So then, your biggest challenge becomes removing yourself from sales, right? So then the revenue generation portion can essentially happen without you. And that's, really a significant pillar of the business itself, right? So I'd say another misconception is, the elusive figure of the $1 million or the 7-figure business, right? I think people don't quite understand what happens once you cross over into that $1 million mark. And again, a lot of people see that as a destination, but they don't realize how much of a starting point that is for more problems to occur, right? Because typically what happens, so, let's talk about the typical pathway for when people get to their first 7 figures, right? And you're going to laugh because you've seen all this, right? They're hustling their ass off, doing whatever it takes to get money through the door. They're likely taking whatever type of client that they want to get through the door. They probably have a ton of service offerings, to generate the actual leads. They probably have a ton of things that they're doing for lead gen, but not necessarily any predictability across the board. And you typically don't have too many systems dialed in, too many operations, because you really just focus on sales and marketing, which is one thing that you absolutely should do, followed by making sure that your delivery is just completely streamlined and taken care of, right? So all of these issues become amplified because once you cross over into $1 million, you all of a sudden are at this point where you have to start hiring in order to go to the next level, but becomes this chicken or the egg problem, right? Because now you're like, okay, well, I have cash, but it's really not that much when you think about it, because I have to start hiring all these people, doing all this work just so I can double the company. And I think a lot of people really underestimate what it takes to go from 1 to 2, 2 to 5, and what that whole journey looks like. So if we talk about the ugly, right? That's where it gets ugly. You have to start hiring people, and a lot of people have this other misconception that being independent is what takes strength, right? And to me, being independence is one of the easiest things in the human experience, right? The moment that you have to start trusting other people, working with other people, being vulnerable and transparent with other people, the vulnerability, especially the vulnerability aspect, right? Like those are the moments where you're essentially naked in front of another human being and you're letting them really see you, because interdependence rather than independence and you having to rely on someone else means that you actually have to admit what your weaknesses and faults are. And that could be very threatening to the ego for someone who's never done that before.
It's not the same persona that you put on social media. Like they see now a different reality. They see the other side of the coin. see the good and the bad things, and suddenly someone says, "I thought you had everything like sorted and got together."
Right. Absolutely.
I don't.
Yeah, and this is especially challenging for people that are personal brand based businesses like the expert business or whatever it is, because you fall into one of the most dangerous traps of saying, oh, if I hire people, that won't work because people only want me and they only want how I can help them. And, I'm the special snowflake that can't reproduce anything that I do for other people. Therefore, I'm the only one that can do this type of work. Right. And I've very, very, very rarely come across anything. I mean, honestly, I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now where that's ever the case. Right. Yeah. It's just challenging. So, but anyways, I would say those are probably the two biggest ones is, the myth of solving your marketing problem and the myth of the seven-figure business. Most people at seven figures are struggling quite considerably and get stuck there for quite long. And let's, and I'll just throw a third one in there, which is, most business issues are not business issues. They're actually personal issues masqueraded as business issues. Right. And
more on that.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of people that are stuck at the $1 million mark, even the $2 million mark, right? It's because you're unable to let go of something. Mm-hmm. Whether it's unable to let go of, whether it's, delegating responsibility, whether it's you wanting to look over everything to make sure it's perfect. There's a number of reasons, but it all comes back to you in terms of how you operate in relationship to the business, in terms of your relationship to your own ego and level of significance that you draw from the business, versus, you just feeling significant because you are, right? Because you're just an epic human being, right? But when you start to derive meaning from the business itself, you start to attach a lot of your own identity to the business. And then the worst part is when you start to get a level of success in the business, then you start to fall into the identity trap, right? Because then you're like, oh my God, I've tasted success. Other people see me as successful. So now you won't do anything that actually threatens that identity, right? Because you have now elevated yourself onto this pedestal where you're like, I'm this super successful dude. So now every single thing that you're trying to do from that point forward becomes that much more challenging because you're trying to meet up to your own standard and expectation of success.
Yep.
Right. And now because it threatens that identity, because you want to look good, essentially. So you don't take as many risks. You don't do the things that you don't try the new things. You just do what works for you because you don't want to fail, because you don't want to see how that looks and reflects on you, right? So I think that's, so I would say that's probably the most common thing that I've seen.
Do you see also cash flow to be one of the issues that people face in scaling on the seven-figure path?
Oh yeah, well, I figured absolutely. The only reason why I didn't mention cash flow is because cash flow is the issue why every business, it doesn't matter every business. Yeah.
When you're like 40 million.
Yeah. That's, for those of you listening, cash is definitely king and you want to make sure you're paying attention to cash flow. But, but that is actually, while we're on that topic, why don't we, mention it is, a lot of people have a fundamental misunderstanding of how cash flow actually works, because a lot of people will, let's say that you sell a coaching package or you sell like a services package, right? Where, let's just say it's $10,000 for 3 months of work, right? But you're only collecting, $3,300, 333, whatever, every single month, right? So a lot of people will act as if they got all of that $10,000 up front and make all their decisions based on that thereafter, instead of looking at the actual flow of cash, which is quite literally what's the cash that came in and what's the cash that's going out.
Yep.
And if there's one thing that you can manage in your business, it's get more cash coming in than more cash coming out. And it sounds so simple, so obvious, But this is where, basic fundamental principles of accounting start to trick you, right? Because, you start to see accounts receivable, you're like, oh, I know that's going to come in. But fact of the matter is you don't. So if you start making decisions based on a future that you don't actually know quite exists yet, if you make your decisions based on reality that hasn't quite come yet, but you're making those decisions in the present based on what you think is going to happen in the future, then that's how most people fall into a cash flow issue, right? And it just comes down to optimism, right? It's just like, oh, it's all going to work out. And when it does, I'm going to start making all these decisions now because I want to be proactive and have this balance. But that becomes one of the most challenging parts is that balance between, just optimism and proactiveness.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I was one of them.
Yeah.
Fortunately, my business
we've
partner.
all been there. That's how we know, right? That's how we learn.
That's why I love my business partner, because it's like, yeah, you actually didn't quite close like 30K right now. What do we have? Is like 2K in the account. So this is, and also, what if the client doesn't pay? Maybe they just pay the first and the second, they don't pay the third, something happens to them. And so these are all things that needs to be factored in when you are thinking about how do you use the cash that you have available and how do you make those decisions. So
yeah. Or what if something gets in the way of them paying because you didn't fulfill on what you did, or they have some feedback that's negative, and then you have to do the rework and you didn't factor that cost in.
Yep.
That's probably the biggest, I'd say that's probably like the biggest, sneakiest issue of what affects cash flow is client expectations and managing the client expectations.
Absolutely. And in particular, in a service-based business where, or if you're looking at coaching, mentoring, speaking, if you're working other work with other people's businesses or personal life, there is just as much control that you have on the outcome. I mean, it doesn't depend on just follow, if life was so simple that you follow X, Y, and Z, and then you got result A, then everyone would be like super like multi-trillionaires if that was the case. But actually, you follow step X, Y, and Z, and every person that will follow the same exact step, they will have all different results.
Right.
Depending on where they are in their business, depending on or their life, depending on how much actions they take, depending on the environment, depending on how many people they have in their database, all these different things that they are less, you can control less as a mentor or as a coach. So now let's go into now we have explored like the doom and gloom on the side. We give the reality check. This is your slap in the face of what you're in for. But now there is, like, we see people that are scaling companies. We see people that are fulfilled in having companies that they love working with, working in. We're not saying not have challenges, because that's the reality of business. You will always have things to face. But you can be in a happy place and you can be happy with the business that you have scaled. So how do we now scale the business in the right way? What are the things that we need to consider and have in the forefront of our mind?
Sure. So cash flow projections is obviously one. It's just making sure that you're really planning for what's the cash coming in. Do you actually have the work, or are you like planning for growth, right? Because a lot of people, and this is where it becomes challenging. It's a really difficult balance. Like I think it's one of the harder ones to master is, do you start building all the operations that you need to plan for growth, or do you get the business and then get the operations built behind it, right? So that's always going to be the battle. And of course, the easy answer is, well, make sure you can plan for growth and make sure you still have a margin, but don't squeeze out all your margin trying to plan for growth, because then one thing happens and you're out the door, right? But the number one thing to start scaling is to really look at two different aspects. The first one is, what's the one customer or the one customer avatar or whatever it is that you actually want to serve, and what do you want to do for them? Right. And the thing that you want to do for them, which I call customer delivery, product, whatever the service might be, that delivery should be absolutely streamlined and you should be out of it. Right. And it should happen for that one person. And the reason why it's so important to do something for one person is the nuance of how difficult it is to do the same service for different types of people. So, a lot of agencies, like I used to run a pay traffic agency, like we talked about earlier. And, the number one thing that I never cared to do was niche down, right? And the reason was because I wasn't looking to grow a big asset. I wasn't looking to grow an agency. I did it because I wanted to see as many different businesses as I could, right? But if you're really looking at what's the best practice to grow an agency, it'd be to niche down. And I think the fundamental issue that most people have is that they think niching down means being small. And that is 100% not the case, right? Because here's the thing. One of my buddies, Hayden Power with Power Search Marketing, right? They do marketing only for chiropractors,
right?
So it's literally rinse and repeat, same thing over and over and over again, chiropractor. The moment you throw like, oh, can you do it for a dentist? It's like, well, that just throws off all the operations. It changes the copy, changes the lander, changes how you optimize, it changes the offers that you have to get used to. It changes your sales conversation that you need to have with the person. It changes your marketing message. It changes your customer delivery. It literally changes everything, right? Like every single aspect of your business is tied to who do you actually want to serve and why, right? And so I would say like those two things are probably like the easiest ones. And then of course,
so almost like sounds like more like a back to basic. Because but what I find, I don't know if you can agree with me, but what I find is that the more I think about operations and the more I think about scalability, I'm actually looking at simplifying everything.
Yeah.
And there's less product than streamlining them and just having more people going through them. As you mentioned, so you can cater for more people and you can work with a lot more people and you can offer way more services. No, it's just a freaking nightmare.
Well, I think, and here's the thing is, I think it's coming from a really great space. And I think it's because so many entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs because they really want to serve. They're coming because they want to help as many people as they can, right? And and I think the hallmark of a really great entrepreneur is someone who wants to take a really big problem and solve it for as many people as they can. But where the danger becomes is the feeling or the fear of missing out on serving a certain group of people, right? But when you look at the biggest scaling secrets, it's choose the one person, do the one thing for them, and keep doing that over and over and over again as much as you can until you blow it out of the water to like 10 million, right? Because you can get to $10 million with one type of customer, one thing, just doing that, and that's about it. Because there's only 3 ways to grow a business anyways, right? There's only 3 ways to grow a business, which is get more clients, get the same clients to buy more from you, or charge your clients more, right? 3 ways. It's very, very, that's it. Very, very straightforward, right? But I think it becomes very counterintuitive because, you think by doing more, you can build more. And I think that's the trap that people fall into. But I think that there's also a very real and evident psychological journey that people have to walk through where they have to realize that they're actually falling into the trap of scarcity, of not wanting to turn down business because they don't know where that's going to lead them. And and oftentimes what happens, and don't get me wrong, when you're struggling for cash flow and you're just starting off and you're trying to take on every single business that you can, it's really difficult to say no, right? But saying no and being able to say, hey, hey, you know what? You guys do events. We don't do events. We don't even want to try to figure that out. We're not going to work together, right? But the thing that we specialize in is this. That person will appreciate you that much more. And they might even have a referral for you because now they know that you specialize in that one thing.
That they can put you in that box.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that's the way that it happens in people's minds, and they don't realize how association happens. right? It's like the moment that they think, because what you're really wanting to do is own the word in that person's mind. So the moment that someone says, do you know someone that, you know, does digital marketing for X? You want your name to be the one that pops up for that, right? Do you know someone that's an expert in events, right? You probably want your name to be popping up for that. So it's super important to know, you know, because we're all playing the attention game anyways, right? So what is the space that you want people to take up in their own minds, and what does that actually look like for people?
Absolutely. So that's the first part. So looking at your niche, looking niching down, refine, making sure that you don't cater to everyone, but you focus on one single person, and repeat, and making sure that you take yourself off the delivery. So let's talk a bit more about that, because you know, there are a lot of people, as you mentioned before earlier, that they are listening and they're saying, but how can I do that? I mean, it's only me. Is what is in my head. I can see what the client needs to change. I have the experience, I have the expertise. So how can someone then start transitioning from being at the front of the delivery to getting out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, once you establish who the actual avatar is and who you want to serve, then you want to figure out, well, what problem do you actually want to solve for them, right? And then based on the problem you solve for them, what's the actual outcome that they want, right? And if you think about everything in terms of person, problem, outcome, right? Person, problem, solution, then it starts to become a lot easier, because then that just becomes one person, one pain and problem that they have, one process on how you want to solve for that problem, and then, you know, one actual product or solution on how to actually deliver all that, right? So the first thing is just answering all those questions for yourself. And what's really great, well, and then of course that determines and dictates the price, because that's going to determine the value. So the first thing that you need to do is get super clear on what's the one outcome that you can actually deliver for people, and just cut out all custom work, right? So, and that's probably the other biggest trap for the agency, is when someone says, oh, I need this and they need that. It's like, no, like, we do this one way. You have this problem. We solve that problem for you, and that's it. We don't do anything else outside of that. So that's really just establishing that is the first thing. And then it's really, well, do you have a predictable process that you've proven out to get to that intended outcome? And is it documented, and can you follow your own process to help with that person, right? So again, I'm starting with the right person. I am using the repeatable, duplicatable process that I have personally used over and over again to get to the intended outcome. When you have checked off all those boxes, then you can teach someone else on how to actually deliver that. But this is where a lot of people also fall into the trap, is they hire someone else to solve that problem for them, and then no one knows what's going on. It becomes, you know, wholly unscalable. The you know, the delivery gets affected. Everyone gets, and everyone has a poor experience from it, right? So a lot of people hire too soon because they haven't actually nailed down their core competency before they're actually ready to hire. So there's a lot of merit to, you know, essentially growing a little bit slower, because you can lay a better foundation for yourself.
Yeah. So it's about finding, first of all, making sure that your methodology is like it works. You have the templates, you document all the process, and you do that with a number, with many clients. And by the time you reach maybe like the 500,000 mark, then you have done that. Otherwise, you would not be there. And so then at that point, instead of just being reactive because that's something that I've done in the past many times, which was, oh, I launched this program, I just partner up with someone else and I give them the delivery, which works, but it works. I found that it was great for cash coming in, but then it wasn't scalable at all, because now that particular product or service is reliant on just that person that I've hired. And they have all the relationship with the clients, and they have everything in their hand. And so actually it becomes even more difficult to run and streamline, which is the core, which is like the theme of what we're talking about, streamline here.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hearing you saying. Okay. So
Absolutely.
now we got I know there is way more you gotta say about this topic, but we gotta start wrapping up the interview now. I can just like ask you questions for hours and hours and hours. And I'm sure that our listeners will love to, but is there like one thing before we wrap up that you found that we haven't not talked about that is really important for people to know?
With respect to what?
Respect of scaling the business.
Yeah, I would say the hardest thing is, really discerning if the person's the issue versus the process is the issue. Because a lot of people tend to blame a person for not doing what they asked or were asked, but a lot of people don't set proper expectations. They don't communicate clearly. The process was an issue to begin with, and that person ends up taking the blame rather than the process taking the blame. So I'd say that, often more times than not, if you can really look at that and kind of like give people the benefit of the doubt and just ask yourself, well, is this a process issue or is this a person issue? And if you think the process is good because it's proven whatever, and the person's just not following it, then it's obviously the individual issue. But was everything super clear to them? Were the expectations super clear to them? Was the way that you wanted it to look clearly communicated to them? Did you tell them that you want it in a Google Sheet versus a Google Doc, right? Did you tell them that you want it in a certain font? And because I think a lot of visionaries, especially, that are entrepreneurs, just assume that people can read their mind, and not even assume, like they see their vision of what they want so clearly in their head that they believe that they already articulated everything because they see it, right? So then they leave out a lot of gaps of the detail that's necessary to get closer to that vision that you see in your head.
Like what we really do is actually do it.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's how it's perceived.
Exactly.
Most of the time. So do what?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Zion. So we're now getting towards the end of the interview. It's time to lift the veil. What is something that maybe an app or a tool or something that you use in your business or personal life that is worth sharing, that is worth for other people knowing?
Sure. So I have a book recommendation. So for anyone that is just starting their scaling journey, I'd recommend reading this book called Traction by Gino Wickman. It has a really great foundation and starting point so that you have a really good understanding of how to implement all these different aspects of your business. And it takes you through, how to really start operationalizing things. And it's one of the first books that I read that gave me a lot of context as far as, okay, great. Where do I go from here?
Yeah. Traction from
Gino Wickman.
Gino Wickman. Okay, so the link is gonna be in the show notes, guys, so you can scroll down and get the link right now of Traction. Zion, great talking to you. I know everyone here on this show that is listening say, I want to get in touch with you, I want to follow you, I want to see more of your stuff. What do you have for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way to get in touch with me is just add me on Facebook and actually message me and let me know this is how you found me, because I get a lot of people adding me every single day. So that's a really, really easy way to just follow and see what I'm up to. One thing that I'd like to kind of gift to the audience here is we've essentially created a checklist, and you've seen this actually. We've created a checklist of what the ideal sales process looks like if you're selling anything over $5,000, and all the different stages involved, and what are all the follow-up emails that are needed, or the follow-up communication that's needed, so that things essentially don't fall through the cracks, right? Because a lot of people's sales processes are leaky buckets, so this is a way to plug them. So if you want that checklist, you can just go to 1mt.co/Zion-SFC, which just stands for Sales Follow-Up Checklist.
Brilliant. Can you repeat it again?
Yeah, that's www.1mt.co/mynameszion-SFC for Sales Follow-Up Checklist.
Fantastic. So the link is in the show notes. So you can scroll down, get your checklist right now. I've been through the checklist. Freaking awesome. I've changed a lot of things already in the way I follow up, just from looking at the checklist and seeing some holes that I had in my sales process. So you will find it incredibly useful. So make sure that you download it. Zion, has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity.